And we're back with Lonnie Wright, owner of the Pines 1852, grape grower. And when you came back to the Gorge, you and your wife moved back. She circled the date on the calendar and you had to get back here. Then you went back overseas. Then you came back and heard of an orchardist who was going to be putting in a vineyard. And then you just kind of showed up there one day and got involved.
Right. Well, I was trying to get my foot in the door, and I heard that there was a cherry orchardist in the Dalles was going to try and renovate this old vineyard that had been abandoned for over 20 years. Okay. And I heard that he was starting at 7 o'clock on Monday morning, and so I showed up. And when I got there, he had the hardback 101 text from UC Davis. He had the book open. General Viticulture was the book open to the chapter on pruning.
Really?
And we looked out there, and there were these vines were totally overgrown. There was no trellis. There was no posts and wire. They were head trained on the ground, and there were about 1 or 2 live shoots that were about this long at the time.
So when we see vineyards with, they're all, more up and then strung out like that, that was all just kind of growing along the ground?
That was on the ground.
Really?
And that's the way they did it in the old days. In the old days, they didn't put it up on trellis because they felt like that they'd freeze in the winter if they weren't covered by snow.
Oh.
And it's real hard to get quality grapes, but in the old days, they weren't real interested in quality, just the alcohol.
So. Okay. So obviously very run down. You get this guy to hire you for minimum wage, which back then was like $4 an hour.
Yes.
So you weren't a big time winemaker or anything back then.
Oh no.
Or grower. So you get hired, and then from that point, take us through what happened from there as far as.
Well, that was in '82, and I went to work on the vineyard. Myself and 3 women that he had contracted to work. Did the work. We hoed out the vineyard. We pruned it up. I told him I thought I could help him a little bit with that. And he liked the way I worked, so he hired me to work in a cherry harvest.
Okay.
I worked in a cherry harvest for him, and then after that, he asked me to go ahead and go back and train the vineyards.
Okay.
And so I drove a 2x2 stake in by each vine, and then what you do then is take a shoot, and you take that up, and you take all the other shoots off, so you try to get the terminal shoot to go up the post.
Oh.
And I actually hold the standing backwards broad jump record, because when you reach down into a big clump of grapevine and a snake comes out, you kind of lift off.
Yeah, you get some airtime, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, then in 1986, was it, when Peter Rosbeck called you or something about buying some grapes?
I'd gotten some calls from some other people, and I started putting vineyards in for other people, and basically had a management company. Did at least some vineyards around here in the Dalles, and then Cliff Blanchett had taken grapes off of this vineyard and submitted it to the Oregon State Fair. And everybody knows you can't grow zinfandel in Oregon, and he got a bronze medal on it.
Really?
And that's when Peter Rosbeck was there at the State Fair, and he looked me up. And so he was a home winemaker at that time, and he didn't go commercial until 1994.
Okay. And
so when he went commercial in 1994, the first grapes that he made wine out of was the Old Vine Zinfandel, and he and his partner David O'Reilly, who has Owen Rowe Winery. David has been a retail salesman or a wholesale salesman. He sells to retail outlets for years, and they were the first ones to call it the Old Vine Zinfandel. Everybody just called it Zinfandel up until then, and it truly is Old Vine Zinfandel. Anyway, they made wine out of that grape and also some Merlot that was over on 3 Mile on Hillside Vineyard. And they released that. Their wines were well received, and then we just went from there, and they kept expanding. From 1994 was their first wine. The Old Vine Zinfandel started getting kudos and kind of had a following. And what was interesting was that it was a Columbia Valley appellation, and everyone assumed that since it was Columbia Valley, it was on the Washington side. But that AVA actually it is on the Oregon side as well. And since everyone assumed it was on the Washington side, when the cherry orchardist had a financial misstep and he had to give the property back to a guy in Salt Lake City that he was buying it from. That guy called me and asked if I'd be interested in moving on the place. So I leased it. I got a 20-year lease from him. And when I had the 20-year lease, what was interesting was that David O'Reilly didn't want people to know that it was from Oregon because they would assume you couldn't grow Zinfandel in Oregon. I didn't really want people to know where the vineyard was because I didn't want people buying it out from under me, and I also didn't want to increase the value of the property because I wanted to buy it someday. So for about 15 years, everybody wondered where this vineyard was.
Yeah.
They all assumed it was on the Washington side.
And was it award-winning wines coming from that vineyard during that time?
Yeah.
And
if you look in the Wine Spectator right now and you see Chennai and Old Vine Zinfandel, they'll list it under a Washington under a Washington wine.
Okay.
Yeah, even today, they still have it listed that way.
Interesting, interesting. Well, when you expanded, when you were selling, you were growing the grapes, and you had put in all these different vineyards throughout the gorge, and then you were selling the grapes, and then you decided to start actually maybe keeping some of those grapes. What was that process like?
Well, in 2002, I was able to buy the property, and I decided to start making some wine from it. I asked Peter Rossback if he would make wine for me as well, and we were. Right now I sell grapes to probably, I would say, about 20 different wineries around the Northwest.
Okay.
But I kept some for myself, and the Old Vine Zin, Merlot, and then it was pretty well received. Basically, I farmed by day, and then I'd throw a couple of cases of wine behind my pickup seat and go see if I could get a restaurant to put me on their wine list, or a wine shop, and we were pretty well received there.
Cool. So you're actually pretty careful to say you're not a winemaker. You're a grape grower, or I think you even said grape farmer.
Right.
So there's quite a difference there.
Oh yeah, there's quite a difference. And personally, I prefer to be a grape farmer. I like being outside on days like this when it's 85 out, and I like taking care of the vines, and it's
just more your
just
style.
It's my style. I prefer that to being inside a gray a gray building that's about 60 degrees, and you're just cleaning things all the time.
Right. Well, cool. Well, we're going to continue the conversation. We're going to take another quick break. You guys, Lonnie Wright's on the program. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.